Together we
Talk about unity. Hey, we're really excited to be here today. We've got a controversial video, and it's really not that controversial, except we're going to make it controversial because we're going to question some of the premises. We're going to do what I call provocative thinking. We're going to make people really think critically about some of the subject matter, and that's something that needs to happen in our country. So we're going to do a little training session today with something that is modern day, real life stuff. And so that's going to be interesting as part of our show today. But before we do that, we're going to talk about some of the current events and what's happening out there. So, Richard, tell us what's going on out there.
Well, you said the word critical thinking. I had to get that straight in college. Critical doesn't mean negative. It just means you're breaking it down and looking at it from different angles. And
thinking about it for real.
So it doesn't mean, all of a sudden we're going real negative. It's just we're going to dig into it. So I appreciate that angle that we're going to take today. Well, I have three things before we get to that.
The real deal.
The real deal. Mm-hmm. I just want to touch on something real quick that we could talk about these things all day, many days, every Sunday. But so three things I'm just going to break down real quick. First one is I want to talk about the election issues that we're having right now. Mm. This is unbelievable. I don't know if we've ever had a more aggressive, divided, pointed conversation about elections as we do right now. Some people today are claiming that there's no voter fraud. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is so rare. This just never happens. But others claim that it's never been worse than it is right now. And we're going to find ourselves somewhere in between that. Political science professors, Ashland's professor for political science right now, said that this issue could actually be a powder keg that could really cause our nation to become even more divided. Imagine that. But
are they just talking about just the presidential part of that election? Or are they talking about everything nationwide, all of the elections that are going to be taking place?
Mostly presidential, but the House and the Senate are so divided right now, and there's so much contention that they feel like if we don't get this right, this whole voter integrity issue, that the president has already said it's going to be fair, and we're going to prove that it's fair, and I'm not going to leave office, and they're going we're going to drag him out with guns ablazing, right? This whole thing, and then the other side is talking about voter fraud as well, or voter intimidation. I think was the one that they were mostly concerned with. And so I just want to say this before I dig into it, that any and all issues that hinder or intimidate legal citizens from voting, that has to be addressed. And I don't think our country's done a very good job about that for a long time. So digging into this one, here's some of the types of election fraud issues that are being talked about right now. Well, here's one: impersonation, fraud at the polls, somebody saying that they're someone that they're not. False registration, which means they're using a phony name or an address. Duplicating, duplicate voting, voting in one precinct, then voting in another precinct. Fraud use of absentee ballots, buying votes, illegal assistance at the polls. Another one that has been an issue is voter intimidation. Which is bad. Illegal voting by non-citizens or convicted felons, altering the vote counts, forging signatures of registered voters, and both sides are already crying foul in this election. But where I am on this, Carlen, is I think this issue is about to head to the Supreme Court. Somebody that has legal standing, whether it's our current president or somebody that's running for political office, they have legal standing. I believe they're going to file suit if they feel like they've been disenfranchised or the vote was stolen. And I think it is going to go through the chain and head to the Supreme Court. I believe it will be upheld because it is one of our most important rights. Ending up, and here's my prediction, right? That this is going to end up with in-person voting only, with voter ID cards that are free for all citizens, that is going to have encryption. Meaning, if you die, you can't vote again. Or if you die, you can't vote. If you move, you can't vote in that district anymore. and you can only vote one time.
So you're thinking this is what's going to happen in the long term. This
Long
is
term.
not something that's going to happen before November 3rd.
No way.
You're just
No.
saying that, okay, this is the way the process is
It's
going to work.
it's going to head towards that because this has been a hot issue, and we can't afford for number one our citizens to be disenfranchised regarding voting. Our nation needs to be a representative of our population, and whoever wins. And hey, if you don't like it, then do something about it legally, right?
Right.
So we got to show. We're going to get to it.
Cool.
So number one, number two, protests are absolutely out of control. Absolutely out of control.
It is, man. Okay. And okay, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. I mean, it's getting crazy. Because seldom, we had protests before.
Sure.
We've never had them that lasted for months. We didn't even have months of protests, which means, to me, that somebody is funding them. But anyway, go ahead.
I mean, man, I wish that somebody would buy me 14 brand new Greyhound buses and put my logo on the side. Come on. Where did these buses and vans anyway?
Well, and I have time to be out there for 3 months. I'm gonna take 3 months off. I gotta pay bills.
Right.
I got 3 months. To get those. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Protest strategy. The 14th Amendment grants citizens to the right to peacefully assemble to address grievances against the state.
Yeah.
Protests are different than riots. Mm-hmm. Some people are calling it a protest, but it's not a protest. It's a riot. They're tearing up businesses, stopping traffic. That's not a protest.
Yeah, well, they're saying that, and here's what the protesters would argue. Of course, they would argue that people are hijacking the protest. They're saying they have legitimate protests and that people are coming in who they say are not part of their program and are hijacking them, and they do the violent stuff, and so that's going to continue to be the argument. Mm-hmm. And so, because how do you separate them out? Because if you're standing there and you're doing a protest, which you plan to be a non-violent protest, a peaceful protest, and somebody comes in and they throw a Molotov cocktail, well, it looks like it's your group. And I'm saying that would be the argument. I don't know what the truth of the matter is in any of those situations.
Well, you need to see that coming because that happens many times. When the KKK wanted to come to Tomball and have their little Christian KKK group, whatever that is, and I found out about it. I said, no, we've come a long way in a town, this little country town, and we got a long way to go. But we're not going to do this anymore. I don't know how long you guys have been doing this. I found out about we're not going to do this. So I said, when they show up, we're going to have signs, and had 300 of our people and then several other churches joined in, all up and down the main street, which led up to the community center where this was. It said, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, they're all precious in the sight. Tomball loves everybody, things like that. Mm-hmm. Didn't really bash on that group because we knew that there would be other elements that would come into Tomball that weren't from Tomball that would want to use it as a point of contention. So wherever there was a camera, we had somebody with one of these signs that Tomball loves everybody. Well, the good news is because we responded the right way, probably could have done some more, maybe a little bit less. There was incredible change that happened to our community, and we grew from it, learned from it. But we still got challenges that are going to come in the future.
Yeah, but I live in Tomball now, and it's cool.
I love Tomball.
Well, where I live anyway.
So the tearing up businesses, stopping traffic, and assaulting, even killing citizens. So I just want to say, when somebody gets violent, they lose their credibility, and their voice is diminished. And I love the premise and the strategy behind Martin Luther King, which he accomplished so much with a peaceful strategy, and I think we can too.
Well, and most of the people today, and that's why history is important, analysis of history is important, and understanding it is important, because many of the millennials or the people I think that are out there today, they will argue that Dr. King's methods didn't work. And I think that's just a total misrepresentation of what he did and whether or not it was successful. And so that's another discussion. We'll have another day where we educate the millennial generation, which is not really their fault. It's our fault. It's public education's fault that they don't understand what actually was taking place there. And of course, it's their responsibility to do some of the analysis and some of the work. That's why we've got our video today that's going to require some critical thinking so we can do more education.
So with the bone just real quick,
Sure.
PBS has this video that I watched, 6 hours. It's a historical documentary called African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, talking about this type of the history from the very beginning. That I just encourage everybody to look at that, and especially dig into the way Martin Luther King handled that situation and really brought about some significant change. Okay, last one real quick. The shooting of the 2 police officers in LA. Wow, I just want to touch that. I looked at some statistics, and do you know there's a 28% increase in officers being shot this year alone? 28%. And that's over 1 out of every 4 people, officers. That's a huge jump. 7 of those were killed in ambushes. This particular instance in LA it happened in Compton. And these 2 officers right now are in critical condition. But really what really caused me to say I want to talk about this was these folks were calling themselves protesters, but they weren't protesters. They were yelling. They were at the hospital. They were trying to keep them from getting the medical care that they needed. But then they start verbally assaulting the officers that are standing guard around the facility. And the one guy kept yelling, "I hope they die. I hope these officers die." I thought we've moved into a very dark place as a country if we're going to continue going down that avenue. And if our society keeps going in this direction, I have one question for you, Carlen. What's going to be the end of this issue? Shooting police, what's going to be the end result?
Well, and you start with making the police the bad guy, then you go to defunding the police, then you go with the shooting of police, and then, and so the anarchists win. I mean, and that's what happens in the end. But there are too many other people on the other side who will not allow that to happen. There are what I call Americans who really believe that you can take the chaos and bring order and bring peace back to a civil society, and you do that with good people leading on the other side. So they're leading and doing a lot of bad things. When anybody who advocates the shooting of policemen and not giving them help, letting them die, that's nobody, and hopefully nobody is siding with that, although there were people on video who actually were saying that. And of course Fox News cast those people as Black Lives Matter. Nobody knows who they're actually a part of, but nobody can support that. If you support that, then you're one of the people that's not helping our country. That's a problem.
Well, a country void of police force, the issue that I feel is really going to be the problem is then you're going to have people trying to defend their person and their own property that are not trained, that are not disciplined.
Yeah, that's next.
And then we're going to see the Hatfields and the McCoys. You shot my son, so I'm going to shoot your. Where does it end? It's just, you're right. It heads into an anarchy type of situation. I'm just hoping that that's not the direction we're going to go.
And I think it ends with the American Unity Movement bringing about. And Talk About Unity show, where we talk about unity and give people another alternative.
Yes.
We give them an opportunity to come together and be the force for change in our country, be the force for unity and peace among each other. And so that's what our objective is. And so, so now we're going to cut to, and we got this video. We're going to take a break. And after we come back from that break, we want you to put your thinking caps on and get ready to think critically. I posted a video yesterday on Facebook. It had Condoleezza Rice talking. I said, there are some things that you can watch in video that increase your IQ by like 20 points. Right. We got one of these videos today because we're going to ask you to think. And if you just watched it without thinking, then you're probably just going to say, yeah, I got it. But we're going to ask you some hard questions about it and really make you think about it. So we're going to be back right after this, and we're going to play the video, and let's get ready to think. Talk about unity. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk
And I bring the unity.
And together we talk about unity.
unity.
Unity is what matters.
Come on.
And right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad to Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk about unity because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters. Controversial video, but it's really not controversial, but it's going to be that way because it's going to require you to really think about what's being said in the video. We're going to ask some questions after it. We're going to have some dialogue about the video, and we hope to actually educate and stimulate your thought processes concerning this issue of called race. All right. So now, without any further ado, we're going to cut to this video. Pay attention, get your pen and paper out, get ready to take notes, because afterwards we're going to have some hard discussion about the video. So without further ado, let's roll the tape.
Hey, line up. Line up. Everybody line up. We're about to race. Everybody line up. Shoulder to shoulder. Take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up. We're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
All right, so here we go. Wow, I hope you watched that video. That video is entitled The Unfair Race. And it uses the analogy of a physical race to talk about the concept of race and how some people have had a head start. But we're going to discuss that, and we've got it broken down into 4 different segments. And in the first segment, I want to talk about that, because in the first segment, you have one guy standing out here, you got all the participants there, and one of the first things he does is he begins issuing commands.
Yep.
All right? So in this analogy, there's an authority figure who's out there giving commands. And one of the things he says, line up, everybody take off your backpacks, everybody get on the line, we're about to race. He sets the tenor for what's supposed to happen. So as we talk about this and relate it to race and understanding what's coming up down the road, the first thing that we've got to do is understand that there's an authority and that we've got to follow that authority in order to be a part of the race. Now, if you look at what's happening in our society today, I think we don't have a healthy respect for authority. And when this guy says, line up, there are a lot of people who says, you can't tell me what to do, you can't tell me to line up, and they would disrespect that authority. So I would say in this video, he should have said, okay, if you don't line up, take 2 steps backwards. You know, take 2 steps backwards because you haven't done the first thing.
Right.
You know?
No, if you're not listening to the instructions, if you have a problem with authority, you're probably going to miss the instructions. And when it's time to start or move or take action, you're not going to do it. So you're disqualifying yourself in the race from the very beginning simply because you have a problem with authority. You tell me that's not an issue today.
Yeah.
On many fronts, whether it's employment or law enforcement or whatever.
All right. So that's the first part. That's script. That's in the script. That's segment 1. And so that's our message today. Think about that. Think about that before the race even starts. Before the race even starts. Some people think some people are ahead before the race starts. I say no. You know, think about it. 1-year-olds, they're all even. They're all even. They all want the same thing. They're all even. But it's as they go through the process of submitting to authority, because by the time some are 7 and 8, if they're having a problem with authority, they're already behind. They're already behind. Race hasn't really started for them. The race of life hasn't started at 7 or 8 years old, you know, but they're going to get there because 13 is coming, 14 is coming. Now the race of life is on, and if they're already behind, it's too late. All right. So now let's go to the segment 2. In segment 2, the authority tells them what the goal is. He tells them that they're racing for this $100 bill, and the winner of the race will take that. And then he sets the parameters and says, before I say go, he makes these statements, and he lays out the rules by which some people can advance. Now, I think the part of the problem with the video, in my viewpoint, like we said, I'm going to make it controversial, is because he begins to give orders to the participants upon which they can take steps forward. And one of the things about those steps forward, they have nothing to do with the person who's taking the steps. Now, I think in reality in life is, and this is what I teach, I was a high school teacher, JRTC leader, and so I'm into leadership things. And my view is that everything that you do in life has to do with you, starts with you. There are a lot of external circumstances. I can't control the family that I grew up in, the neighborhood I grew up in. I can control my reaction to those things. That's right. And that's what I teach them. And so when the authority begins to lay out the parameters and tell people, all right, if this has happened, take 2 steps forward, then I think that's kind of artificial in the sense that, well, you should have me taking 2 steps forward based on me, not based on these other things that I have no control over. Because after all, you determine whether or not you want to take 2 steps forward. Because think about it, once again, back to the authority, when he said, take 2 steps forward if your parents are still married, yeah, that has nothing to do with you, all right? That has nothing to do with you. Now, I understand in this video that that could be a very positive thing, and I think it is. My mom and dad were married for 60 years. 60 years. You think that didn't give us some great advantage? It gave us great advantage in some areas. You know, it did. But it still required us to do the next part, which was take 2 steps in a certain direction. So, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking you're nailing it right here, where it should be, instead of taking 2 steps forward, it should be take 2 steps backward, because it does affect people. But the whole thing of the taking steps forward and taking steps backward, people talk about white privilege or just privilege in general, because you have parents, or you didn't have to beg for a meal, and these different things. I've seen what through the lens of just looking at face value, people that grew up in very affluent homes, mom and dad's there, they never had need for, whatever they wanted, mom and dad got it for them. And then all of a sudden they graduate either high school or college or moving into their early adult years. They've never been told no. Everything they've ever wanted in life was given to them. And now all of a sudden they have to show up on their job on time. They have deadlines they have to meet. They have projects they have to complete. And they've never been told no. And when they just blow it, they just don't clean their room, so a maid cleans it, or somebody takes them to their appointment or whatever. And all of a sudden now they have to be accountable for their own actions. That adolescent privilege that they were the recipient of, all of a sudden now it's biting them. Now it's hurting them, because they don't understand what hard work and the value of a dollar really is. And so now they're playing catch up. Actually, it's a cold, stark reality. Hey, listen, life is not as rosy in my own world. I was cushioned by my privilege, and now all of a sudden I'm having a hard time grasping how to live in the real world. So
yeah, that's very good, because so when he makes these rules of two steps forward, when he makes those statements and identifies those rules, the critical thinking, the competitors in the race should have asked why, and each one should have been questioned on, is this thing actually something that gives me an advantage, or does this give me disadvantage? Because when you are taught right, that's why I'm a teacher, I love doing this, when you're taught right, your disadvantage becomes advantage. And if you understand that, you can make your disadvantage advantage. You can make that work for you. But understanding that if I have this idea, I was watching this video with Condoleezza Rice, and she was talking about the politics of jealousy. The politics of jealousy. If I look over and say, well, that person had this, and I'm not looking at my advantage or my opportunity to make some advantage out of my disadvantage, then I create my disadvantage. And so we got to understand that. So that's the problem with that part of the script, where he begins to laying out the rules. Now we're going to get to this really meaty part, this segment 3, all right? And I'm going to go through all the things that they identify in the video. And we're going to talk about these things. We're going to break these down, because if everybody can come from their background. My parents were married 60 years. They got 6 kids. None of us are going to make that mark, because we've all got divorces, so we've already messed that up, all right? So we're going to see how advantageous some of these things are, all right? So here's what the authority says in the video. At this point, he says, take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Now, we agree that that's a very positive thing. Our society could use that. Parents sticking it out, being there, because one of the things that contends is that means, number one, there's a man in the home. Mom and dad are still there, and that's the biggest thing. I think there's a man in the home, and I think the statistics will show you that people who grew up in that environment generally do better, all right? But, so that's one of the factors. That's one of the factors, all right? If your parents. Then the next one is, do you have any comments on that thing? I know you got some comments.
Yeah.
Mom and dad are still there.
Oh, my dad's living in heaven, and my mom, she's been successful in her own right. But my parents were married, then they divorced, and then they remarried each other.
Oh, wow.
And then they divorced each other again, and then they married other people. And that whole thing for me and my brother and sister was distracting, to say the best. To say at the least, and the best. And I remember when they were going through their second
So
divorce.
they would know where do you take, what are you going to take 1.5 steps for? Or,
Yeah,
you don't know what kind of steps you're going to take.
One of my legs in the air, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I remember in junior high when they announced to us that they were calling it quits the second time, and I was sitting in Dr. Hawkins' science class in junior high, and his rule was, if you don't do your homework, you're going to come out in the hall and get swats.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So my books were strung all over, from the grocery store. I didn't even know where my books are. I didn't care about homework because, my goal was to, one of my idols was Dr. Poindexter. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a veterinarian because he was a good veterinarian. Mm-hmm. And so when I found out they were getting a divorce, in my mind as a kid in junior high, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make it because I can't. They can't help me through college. And so I just stopped. I went from almost straight A's to barely passing. Mm-hmm. And he'd just take me out in the hall and bust my tail with the paddle. And I didn't say anything. I just like this.
It was legal then. Everybody, don't go call CPS.
No,
it was legal then. Okay.
He just didn't understand. I wonder how many kids are they're contemplating just giving up. I'm not saying taking their life, but I'm saying just not wanting to try anymore.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And they don't really fit the bill of a family that would really. This doesn't really fit the description of a family that would want to give up. No, divorce is colorblind. It really is.
Yep. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And so we just need to really be careful because we don't know the reason why all of a sudden there's an abrupt change with young people. Anyway, I did. I'm sorry. I took a little while.
Well, the important thing that you brought out that you distinguished there for the video is that everyone's case is so different.
So different.
Because you're not really a simple, well, my parents were kind of together. They were kind of not. What kind of effect does it have in the race? How would that get you ready for life? We don't really know. Yeah. I mean, that one's very hard because, like I said, it might put you forward, might put you backward.
Right.
And so so the only thing I contend, and you'll get this through all the things that I'm going to say here, is that it's up to those individual participants in that race. They've got less opportunity, and I won't even tell you just some of the stories of a Ben Carson or even a Condoleezza Rice. These people who succeeded beyond the circumstances. Right. We know that happens. It needs to happen more, and it'll happen more when we understand that it can happen and we pour into the lives of the young people. All right, so let's get to the next one. It says, take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. If you had access to a private education. Some of the people, private education, in the 70s, 80s was, you dropped out of school and you stayed at home and worked. That was your education. Yeah. Mom and dad needed you to support the family, so you were working. Mm-hmm. That's a private education. I know that's not what they're talking about in the video, but the question is of how much weight is that compared to the person who's going to private school? And I think it's very weighty. You've got great success stories of people who didn't finish high school and did amazing things.
That's right.
And so, what do you think?
It plays a huge factor. Those formative years with education, private education, it really helps young people be able to take that leap into secondary levels of education after elementary, junior high, and high school.
Yeah, that's very important as we think too about, because when you start talking about education, and because what coronavirus has taught us, of course, with most people being at home, is that people understand the great job teachers are doing and what teachers have to go through. And so education, and I did very late in life. I mean, I've got 2 master's degrees, bachelor's degree, and whatever. But when I finished high school, when I finished college, I said, I'm never going back to school again. I didn't understand the value. But now that we understand that, then and it has a different view with the technology that we have on what it means to get an education. Right. So that's another issue on how many steps you need to take forward based on that, because there's a lot of practical life experience and there's a lot of school-related experience, both that have value, how much we don't know. All right, so we're about halfway through on this segment, and we got a few more to go. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got more of those 2 steps forward questions for you to think about. So get ready when we return after this. Hello, I'm Carlen Charleston, Executive Director of Erase Races, and I want to take this time to invite you to an opportunity to change the world. Perhaps you're too busy and too preoccupied to help change the world, but please take the next 2 minutes to listen to how we plan to do it. The divisiveness and bitterness observed in our country today is not a coincidence of the current administration or any administration before. It is also not a product of a singular or multiple infractions by a zealous or racist police force. No, the race problem precedes the founding of our country. Our very history speaks in racial language, and most everything that happens in our society now carries with it racial baggage. It simply does not have to stay that way. The Erase Race campaign has only one objective: the unifying of all Americans, and that without regard to the color of their skin. This is a difficult challenge because of our history, but we can do it if we believe. If we believe that Martin Luther King Jr. was right when he said, "We are tied together in a single garment of destiny," we can do it. We can do it if we believe the founding principles upon which our country was built, that all men are created equal, we can do it. And if we believe that God did in fact make all nations of men from one man, and that we are all therefore part of one family, one race, then we can do it. Yes, the task is monumental, but the reward is worth the challenge. If you would like to join us as we change America and inevitably change the world, go to eraseraces.com, sign up today, and welcome to Erase Races, because there is only one race and you're in it. Drive that's happening September 26th. Make note of it. September 26th from 4 to 8 p.m. They're going to have nice vibes down here. We got the music happening and everything else. But 2 hours out of that, you'll come down and be able to register to vote, which is very important. So come down here. That's September 26th. That's that Saturday. So make it down here at Midtown Bar and Grill, 415 West Gray Street down here in Houston. Come down here and check it out. All right. We'll see you then. All right. So now as we get back to our controversial video, the one that I made controversial, we were talking about the fact that some people get to take steps forward in life based on the rules of what has happened in their life. Of course, I contend that you really take steps forward based on your efforts in life. All right.
That's it.
But here we go. Let's continue on. It says, take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private tutor growing up. You know, and to me, that folds into the first one. The first question was if your parents are still married. Because they were your tutors. Now, I know the new age now that people got big money and they go out and they pay people to tutor their kids or whatever. But back in the old days, back in the 60s when I was a kid, your tutors were your parents. They were your tutors, you know. And so I guess I would be able to answer that question. Yeah. So, and when I think about that video as a whole right now, and I should probably do this in summary, but man, I'd been up in the front.
Yeah,
I'd have been up in the front, like with a lot of those questions they ask, and of course the way that I would have answered them. But did you have access to a private tutor?
No.
Get to the
most of the time, it was my dad telling me not what I should do, what I shouldn't do. But I was thinking about the private tutor. I had a whole neighborhood of private tutors.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
Everybody had private tutors in the 60s and 70s.
They found out what you did wrong.
That's right.
Everybody's telling you, don't you ever talk to your mama like that. You know, you better get home. You know, when we were taught that when the street light came on, you better be home, and so they would help. But no, as far as education goes, no, we didn't have any of that.
All right. All right, now, of course, now here's one. Check this out. So here's one I would not be able to take 2 steps forward on. It said, take 2 steps forward if you never had to worry about your cell phone being cut off. Yeah, we didn't have to worry about that. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have a cell phone. You know, think about if you have, and worrying about your cell phone getting cut off. I mean, that's like really luxurious. Yeah, really luxurious. Right. So, yeah, so I wouldn't take steps forward on that. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, I know a lot of kids who wouldn't be able to take steps forward on that because, you know, and nowadays, of course, everybody gives their kids these phones very, very early. But our kids didn't have phones until they were out of junior high and high school, you know. So that's one. What do you think about the phone, your cell phone being cut off? And that's the thing. The question is, take 2 steps forward. If you didn't have to worry about it, that's a different level. Not if you had a cell phone, which might be something, because I think that's something special. But like you were saying before, I don't necessarily know that's an advantage.
No, it's not, because during storms, when we lose cell phone reception, whether it's a hurricane or something, and causes cell phone towers to go down, and so you don't have cell phones, all of a sudden now the family begins to talk, or they begin to think about things, or actually do their homework, right? Instead of whatever social media app that they're on. Yeah, and so that's not a disadvantage to not have cell phone reception. In fact, when my tool was, hey, you like that cell phone? Yeah, you do? Yeah. Well, let me see a C on your report card, and you're going to find what it's like to not have that cell phone. So it was a motivation to get their cell phone. And but when they didn't have it, they found that they had a lot more time to do their homework, had a lot more time to study. So not having a cell phone is not a disadvantage to me.
Okay. All right. And then the next one says, take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. If you never had to help mom and dad with the bills. I disagree with that. Taking 2 steps forward if you never had to help mom or dad with the bills. If you had to help mom or dad with the bills, you understand the value of $1.
That's it.
You understand a work ethic. You understand what your mom and dad are having to go through. I think that's very positive. You mature and become, because you have begun adulting, which is a verb now, adulting, and you've done that at a relatively young age, which is very beneficial. There's nothing wrong with you beginning to do responsible adulting at a very young age, where you learn what your parents have to go through to feed you, to clothe you, and to participate in the family. You know, having been in the military and traveled around the world, I've noticed that in other cultures, that adulting and that sense of responsibility starts very early compared to here in America, where we'll wait. And I've seen teenage boys who don't cut the grass in their yard. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He should be doing that. I had my when he was 2-year-old grandson out washing my car. Because to him it was fun. And but what I'm doing is I'm teaching him that work, and to him he'll grow up thinking that it's not work, it's fun. It's part of what we do, something for the good of the family. And so I think having to help mom and dad with the bills teaches a lot. And maybe you don't want to give people steps forward, but you surely don't want to give other people an advantage because they haven't had to do that, because they haven't learned that sense of responsibility.
Financial lack in our family. My mom, I think her plan in life before the first divorce was to be a housewife. I think that was her plan. Of course, that plan changed drastically, quickly. And so then now all of a sudden she's finding herself in the workforce. Her first job was when she was 15, 14, working at a burger shake shack kind of place. And so she wasn't afraid of hard work, having 6 siblings in her home. But finding work for her, going out and asking for a job was, I think, difficult for her at that time. She ended up over at an Eckerd drug store. People don't know what that is, but anyway, she had favor with the employers, the managers or owners of this store, and they would actually give her the popcorn. They have bags of popcorn, as much popcorn she wanted, all the expired Valentine candy and peanuts and canned foods that were about to expire, and that's what we lived on for quite some time. But to see my mom work and then find another job and work and try to keep us food, clothing, and shelter, that did not cause me to resent my mom or take a step back, because we would mow grass and we would do those things too. I think it instilled in me an honor and a respect and appreciation that my mom, and I tell her every year at her birthday, thank you for being mom. You had every right to just say, I can't handle these kids. I just have to make it and let somebody either foster, give us up for in the foster system, but she didn't. So that was not a step back. When you see financial lack in your home and how your parents tried to provide was such an important thing. That boosted me forward. That didn't.
That's really good. That's really good. So yeah, so you make the point that those things that I think in this particular, and what we're doing today is we watched the video. If you haven't had a chance to watch the video, it's called The Unfair Race. Pull it up on YouTube. It's $100, The Unfair Race, where they're talking about why some people start ahead in the race of life. And we're countering some of that. We're asking people to think critically about some of the points that they make in the video and whether or not those things are in fact advantages or disadvantages. And so Richard made a very good idea, a very astute idea, that point that those things, when you see the hardship that your family goes through, that can be turned into a very advantageous situation, very positive, a good positive in your life, rather than the negative that we determine it to be in most cases. And so very, very good point. Okay, let's go to the next one. It says, take 2 steps forward. If it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Now, all right, so one of the things they did here was they took out one of the key things that might have availed you to an opportunity in your life. And they're saying, all right, take out all the athletic scholarships. Well, that's very valuable. I mean, don't take away the thing that is a positive for me, the thing that I've used. And so what you get here, and now, of course, I'm the erase race guy. And so you see now that the narrative here is to try to make sure that we create a racial divide. Because so what has happened here, they take away, take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability. In other words, so don't count the people who got athletic. I went to college on an athletic scholarship, playing football. So that was an advantage for me. So that should be 2 steps forward. If you really want to give 2 steps forward for advantage, I didn't have to pay for school. That offered big dividends down the road, still down the road today. I'm not paying back loans. My wife, who's a lawyer, is still paying back loans from law school. All right? So, I mean, there's some advantage to that. But they take that away in this questioning. And so that's why I'm making the video controversial. Don't take away that thing that is an advantage for me, because now you're saying I should feel disadvantaged because I don't get to go forward, even though I use my advantage and I should be forward. You're saying ignore that. I don't go with that.
No,
it's crazy.
It's so important to look at all of these things, and for some it is a disadvantage. For others, it's an advantage. My situation in the factory, I could not move up because I didn't have a degree. And it was 2 ladies, and of course we're racing race, and here's the hit the button, right? So the one lady that I worked for, she was my supervisor, was Asian, and she said, I know you want that job as a supervisor, you want to move up, but you don't have that degree. Why don't you go to school? I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't afford to go to school. She says, no, the company pays for your college if you pass the class. I'm like, well, I'm going to do that. So sure enough, I mean, it took 5.5 years for a 4-year degree, but you're learning. Here's corporate America, and some of us have children that are thinking about going to school. Here's the thing: a lot of times, corporate America will give you the promotion just because you enrolled in school, meaning that you're trying. So my promotion started when I just enrolled in school and turned in my grades, and they reimbursed me, and so don't think just because you haven't that you can't later on. So
very good. Anyway. Good point. Very good point. All right, I like that, where you got promoted just for trying. Effort matters. All right. And then the last one we've got here is take 2 steps forward if you never have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. Well, I don't know if they covered all the areas, but when I was in officer candidate school, Marine Corps, basically boot camp style, we had to be concerned at some points where our meal was coming, because we go through hunger deprivation training and whatever, so we go without food. But once again, this is a disadvantage, and when you have this worry, then I think that can be very advantageous, because number one, you understand the value of work it takes to pay for your meal, to get a meal, or whatever. And so you understand what it takes from your mom and dad, and it gives you an opportunity to be in control of your own destiny. If I realize today I am going to starve to death if I don't go and get my own food, you'd be amazed at how motivated I can be to do the right thing or to do some things necessary for my survival. That's very advantageous to me, very advantageous. What do you think?
Yeah. I remember as a kid, we ate many jam sandwiches. You know what a jam? Do you know what a jam sandwich
jam
is?
Sandwich, yeah.
2 pieces of bread jammed together.
Yeah.
We had lots of that. But you know what? We found out that a pot of beans goes a long way. I grew our own garden many times because that wasn't cheap. A little bit of labor in the beginning, but always produced a crop and raised chickens and some things like that. Just growing up, and you found out that if you try a little bit, you can make things happen. It was not a disadvantage to us. I see a lot of young people in our community today that eat out 4 or 5 times a week, and man, when they actually move off and get married, and life's going to be great. Yeah, until you go to the grocery store, you spend your whole check at the grocery store. Yeah, it's we make it a disadvantage if we allow it to be a disadvantage.
All right, so I'm going to read through our last segment here, and we'll be closing out here in a second. So it ends up in the video, and after he's asked all these questions, and now we've got these people all aligned at different stages, spread out, then he makes this final statement. And he tells everybody, he says, I want you guys to turn around and look behind you. He said, every statement that I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done, which I found as the problem. So none of that stuff had anything with you to do with you, but you need to be in control of your destiny. But he ignores that. He says, everything I've said has nothing to do with any decisions you have made. We know the people up here, he was talking about the people in the front, they have a better opportunity at getting the $100 to win the $100. And he says, does that mean that the people in the back can't race, that they don't have the skills and ability? He says, no, we will be foolish not to realize that the people up front have been given more opportunity. So we argue with some of those premises. He says, goes on to say, we don't want to recognize that those people in front have been given a head start, but the reality is that they have. He says, now that's not an excuse for the people in the back. They still have to run that race, but they're going to have to run faster in order to get to the $100. But whoever wins, and he goes on to say, but whoever wins the $100, it would be foolish for them not to use that to learn about someone else's story. Now, this is the part of the video that I really like, because I think it's important that we value everyone else's story. And I think even through this exercise, as you go through this, like we did the questions, it would have been a better analogy of the race if you'd have set all those people down and ask them those questions and ask them, do you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage? And then see where people would line up, based on how they reacted to the circumstances of life, because we are responsible for how we respond to the circumstances of life. That will determine if it's an advantage or disadvantage. Then he goes on, he says, but because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everyone was back on that line, then he brings up the race thing. He says, I guarantee you, those black dudes would smoke some of you. That's what he actually says in the video. Those black dudes would smoke you, which means this was actually set up to separate people by race. It really was. And so that was my problem with it. And then he says, it's only because you've had a head start that you're possibly going to win this. And then he says, that's a picture of life. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead right now, but you are in the lead because of simply, and he talks about the skin color. So let's close it out, Richard, man. That's kind of crazy. All right, that's the video.
My point is that if you want to find an excuse, you can find an excuse. If you want to find the drive to succeed regardless of what's been thrown at you, you can succeed. And there will always be somebody that's critical, and I'm saying negative critical, of your success. And there's always somebody that will pat you on the back and say, oh, poor you. Yeah, you were disadvantaged, and just give you incentive to not try. It's up to us. It really is up to us. But if you see somebody that is at a disadvantage, why don't we be a lead blocker? If actually we've succeeded despite the odds, then why don't we lead block? Why don't we pioneer? Why don't we get more involved in mentorship with those that are behind and say, come on, this is, when, so real fast, back in the day, I was on the hiring teams in the factory thing. And we found that there were people that should have failed that blew it out of the water, and people that should have succeeded because they never knew how to apply themselves. And man, don't take the bait. Just do your best and, hey, treat everybody how you'd want to be treated. Better yet, treat others how you'd want somebody to treat your son or daughter.
Yeah, very good. All right, hey, that's it today for our Talk About Unity show. If you get a chance, go check out The Unfair Race and then look at our comments that we made here today and get your thinking going. We want critical thinking, provocative thinking, and remember, don't push me because I'm
Close to the edge.
Talk About Unity, Edge Radio Network. See you all next week.